Welcome to RVA's Got Issues, a podcast about politics and public affairs in and around Richmond, Virginia. I'm your host, Rich Marr. Each episode, you'll hear from the biggest newsmakers and action takers here in RVA. We'll tell you what's happening, what's next, and what you can do about it. On this episode, RVA's Got Issues with gun violence. You'll hear from Maurice Washington and Sarah Scarborough. They're part of a local nonprofit that has implemented a successful gun violence prevention program in Hopewell. And now they're bringing it to Petersburg and here in Richmond. Then RVA's got questions about why it's so hard for local government to fix problems. If you ask them, they may tell you, we can't, and it's all because of a guy named Dylan. We'll answer a listener question about the Dylan rule and why it's so important for local governments in Virginia. Finally, RVA's got answers about mindfulness. Ashley Williams is the founder of The Well Collective, a place and a movement that brings history and healing to Shockoe Bottom and beyond. All that and more coming up on RVA's Got Issues. On this episode, RVA's got issues with gun violence. Dr. Sarah Scarborough and Maurice Washington join us from Real Life, a Richmond-based nonprofit group that works with returning citizens, people exiting from incarceration. In 2023, Real Life launched the Violence Prevention Initiative in the city of Hopewell. This program aims to prevent gun violence and has already produced results with an over 70% reduction in shooting deaths in the first 6 months of the program. Sarah, Maurice, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Sarah, let's start with you. You're the founder and director of Real Life. I think you have a sense of the big picture here. How has gun violence been addressed in the past? How is this program different from what we've done before?
A lot of the gun violence efforts and initiatives that you see not only in the city in Virginia and across the country are on a very macro level and also on a level that really has been left to law enforcement. A lot of it also has been more prevention rather than intervention. And so this program really gets to that. It identifies folks most likely to shoot or be shot and then provides interventions. And so literally bullets stop flying immediately.
Yeah, one of the interesting things is this focus on preventing retaliations. What exactly does that mean in the context of eliminating gun violence?
Most gunfire that happens is by a very small percent of an entire population. You're looking at 0.1 to 0.5% of an entire population. That is also driven by group or gang involvement. Sometimes it's a formalized gang. Other time it might just be a few folks in a neighborhood. But about 70% of gun violence is driven by this very small percent that is group affiliated. And so while an initial gunfire may not be avoided, and can't be avoided, most issues really lead to for retaliations. That's what research shows. And so if we can't prevent the first one, we can intercede and intercept so that the next four are avoided.
And so this really is hands-on, the way that this program's described, how it's modeled. Maurice, that's where you come in. As a coordinator, you do a lot of the hands-on service work, working with people in the program. Now, before we get into the details of the program, you said to our producers that you knew this would work when you first learned about it. Can you talk more about why you felt that way when you heard about it?
I just went back to situations that I've been in, specifically a situation, when I witnessed my friends get killed in front of me. At the time, I was just outside hanging out with my friends, and I was on the phone. I seen them backing up, two guys walking up to them with guns in their hand, that trying to rob them, and I took off running. I'm thinking I'm gonna get shot in the back. I didn't. Made it in the house as the gunshots was going off, and I ran upstairs and started looking out the window. And they died in front of me while I was on the phone with law enforcement. And when the law enforcement came, they asked me a bunch of questions, and it kind of gave me the feeling like I might have set them up or something like that. So this whole situation is it really hurt me because I'm like, I called y'all, I sat in and watched them, watched them die. And the family came there, I was telling them the same thing. My truck was shot up, and I was really going through it. So hearing about this program, what we do, I just wish I had somebody to come talk to me and say, "Are you okay? I know your friends just got killed in front of you. Do you want somebody to talk to?" I'm like, yes, I do need somebody to talk to.
Right. So you're able to take that experience to the people that you're working with, right? You can say, I was where you were at some point.
Yes, I've been to prison. I've been locked up in several jails throughout the city and been involved in the streets majority of my life. And a lot of guys I'm dealing with are doing things that I did most of my life. So I'm somebody to them that has changed their life around. I stand on positivity, how I live my life every day, and I'm able to show them exactly how I did it.
That's great. You're glad to reach out to someone the way you wish someone had reached out to you, but that still suggests to me that you need a lot of work to prep this, right? You can't just wander in and just say, I'm Maurice, believe me, trust me immediately, right? There's some preparation, there's community buy-in. Who has to be involved? Like, how do they actually get the buy-in?
It really is a community effort. And before implementing this program in any locality, it's about 6 months of planning. And a huge part of that planning process is really engaging the community, from the police department to government, elected officials, the school superintendent, the football coaches at the high school, probation, Commonwealth attorney. But then you're also looking at local social services, philanthropy, churches, people that have been working within the community that might be with nonprofits or just themselves who have a vested interest. And through that, the trust is established, whether it be community members or clients that our life coaches start working with. It is that partnership.
So, Sarah, your group Real Life has actually been featured in another VPM podcast called Track Change. One of the insights that we learn about a lot of the folks who are incarcerated there is just the way that when you grow up with violence, the kind of fear that you live with. It's not unreasonable for people to want to have weapons, to want to feel like they can protect themselves, but that can lead to really bad outcomes. So, Maurice, what do you say to someone who comes at you with a really rational response? There's violence in my life. What am I supposed to do? I need my own gun. I need to go out and retaliate in order to protect myself. How do you talk to someone who's in that kind of environment?
Oh, I tell them I can relate to them. You know, I've felt that same thing. Been in situations where I have to have a gun. So I'll tell them, like, I understand what you're going through, but if you end up getting in a situation, you could be dead. Or you can end up shooting somebody and being in prison for the rest of your life. I'm not sure what the situation you're in, the beef you have, but at the end of the day, you know, if they got kids, let them know you want to be here for your kids. Like, sometimes you have to change the things you do, the people you hang out with, you know, and the places you hang out at. Like, you have to change those things, or you're going to end up shooting somebody or being shot yourself.
Right. And so how do you find out whether someone is at risk? Right. Are you checking like social media? Are you asking these community members, like the guides, the people you have, like, how are you figuring out this is the person that we need to talk to? They're the one who's at risk.
In the beginning, we sat down with law enforcement, went over the shootings for the last 2 or 3 years. We went over each one, and then we picked out who was at risk. It could be 2 guys, and we know they hang out with each other. And we know that they could retaliate over that. And we know they still have some beef with some other guys. So they know who has beef with who and who might be at risk of shooting somebody or being shot again. So that's some of the things that we look at. But also every week we do the same thing. We sit down with law enforcement. So any shooting that occurs in that week, we look at it and see who might be at risk of retaliating or who's close to them that could be shot as well.
So you have experienced gun violence. You've mentioned that you've come at this from the other side. What do you say to someone who might be worried about this working with law enforcement, right? There's a sense that, oh, you're targeting people, or this is like identifying people and criminalizing them already. Like, yeah, what do you say to someone who's worried about that kind of stuff?
The program isn't designed to attack anybody or lock nobody up. My job is to come in and try to help these individuals. But if anybody is wanted or being looked at by law enforcement, we're not allowed to deal with them. And I also tell them, look, I don't want to know anything about what you're doing. I'm only here to help you. What do you need? And that's where we start at.
We're talking with Sarah Scarborough and Maurice Washington of the nonprofit group Real Life. We'll hear more about their work, including how they're bringing this violence prevention program to Petersburg and here in Richmond, right after this on RVA's Got Issues.
There is so much happening in the news every single day. Keep up with it all by subscribing to the VPM Daily Newscast. It's a roundup of Central Virginia's top stories in less than 10 minutes from the VPM News team. The VPM Daily Newscast is available on NPR One or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is RVA's Got Issues. We're back with Maurice Washington and Sarah Scarborough talking about a new gun violence prevention program. What makes this program unique, as we've been talking about, is its one-on-one approach for addressing gun violence. Maurice, isn't there a term that you use for the part of the process where you actually reach out to people?
Yes, sir. It's called custom notifications. We try to make sure that each one is custom as far as who's the best person that we can go to the door and talk to these guys with in order to build a better relationship with them. It might be a football coach or somebody that if we know that they play baseball, we try to reach out to the baseball coach. So when I'm introduced, they're vouching for me. But also when I talk to them, I'm able to meet them exactly where they are.
And so what does happen after that initial custom meeting? You said you're relentless. So what does that mean? Like, how does that translate into what happens afterwards?
My first thing is I try to take them out to eat. There's just something about sitting down, eating with the guys and being able to get to know them initially. A lot of them like that. So it sounds good to me, and that's what we do. So the biggest struggle is just to keep them engaged with me. So we try to do things like keep reaching out to them. And I got a couple guys now that I've been doing that with, and now they're calling me. They might be going through something. They don't feel like dealing with me but then a month later, I reach out to them and they in a different headspace and like, yeah, let's go grab something to eat. And then I'm able to reach them again.
So now you folks are expanding, right? You're bringing the program to Petersburg. You're also working in Richmond here with the Richmond Regional Housing Authority, which operates the public housing projects in Richmond. Sarah, where are we in that process? How are you adapting to this new environment here in Richmond?
Yeah, so we began both in the Richmond housing communities, RRHA, and Petersburg in January as far as planning. And it'll take us about 6 months, so through June, of the planning, the vulnerability problem analysis, identifying those who are at risk, really understanding the group dynamics and the layout, and establishing the partnerships within the community that we had talked about before. And so that's where we are right now. We are excited to start. It is so important. I think obviously for the obvious, everyone watches the news and see what's going on in all of these areas. But without doing Petersburg, we can only be but so successful in Hopewell. And without doing RRHA in Richmond, we can only be but so successful in Petersburg. There is a ton of cross-section in violence between Petersburg and Richmond. There is a tremendous amount between Hopewell and Petersburg in all around. And so really taking this approach will lead to the best success now, but also long-term.
Yeah, so what does success look like? How do you imagine success for this program?
It's really simple. Gun violence reduction. So we looked at the number of shootings from June to December of 2022 in comparison to that same period in 2023. And we had a 71% reduction in gun violence and about a 40% reduction in overall violence. And so it really is looking back and comparing this month versus this month last year and looking at the number of how many shootings there were, how many bullets to body, how many homicides, and hopefully seeing that go down. We also look at other things such as the number of folks that not only does our life coaches engage with, but then long-term engagement. What does that look like? So do they get a job? Do they get in more trouble? Are they arrested again? What is going on with probation? So kind of those long-term life things we look at as well for each individual.
Yeah, and so Maurice, you're one of those life coaches. So how does success What does it look like to you? What does it feel like to you? Because you're directly engaged with these folks. You're really getting to know them well. So what's a successful outcome feel like to you?
Feels great just seeing guys now from when I first started talking to them, and now they're working, spending more time with their kids. And when I see them, they're just in a happier space. And once again, that's some of the things that I talk to some of the guys about. You know, I just started seeing two of my kids a whole lot more. It's because my life changed, and I'm able to relate that to them.
That's great. And so what can our listeners do to help you folks?
As we've talked a lot about, it really is community partnership that makes this work. And so there is somebody with a vested interest in any of these areas, Hopewell, Petersburg, RRHA, and wants to get involved, wants to do our community engagement, wants to attend events that we have there, anything related to involvement, we would love to have them. So again, all of that information is on our website, reallifeprogram.org, as well as contact us and ways to be able to reach out in order to begin those conversations.
Dr. Sarah Scarborough is the founder and director of Real Life. Maurice Washington is a coordinator with Real Life's Violence Prevention Initiative. Thank you both so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having us.
On each episode of RVA's Got Issues, we'll answer a question from listeners like you, a question about local government or what's going on in the community. On this episode, RVA's got questions about the Dillon Rule. And to answer it, our producer, Amber Coles, is here. Hi, Amber.
Hi, Rich.
So what question do we have?
All right, so this week's question is from our listener, Denise Nelson. Denise's question is, why is Virginia a Dillon Rule state? What would it take to change that? And based on other states, what could we expect to happen if we change this? Now, the biggest question about this question is, who is Dillon?
Right. Is a Dillon a person, place, or thing?
Yes.
Yes, it was a person. It was John F. Dillon. So John Dillon was a state judge in Iowa in the 1860s, and he had some very influential ideas. So Dillon's main idea was that since local governments are technically the creation of a state government, the local governments, we're talking about our cities, our towns, our counties, they can only do the things that state government explicitly says they can. So he said this in some court rulings. He wrote a very influential book in 1873, The Commentaries on the Law of Municipal Corporations. I'm sure you've read that, Amber.
Standard reading at VCU.
Yeah, for sure. I have like 5 copies at home. No one's read this, but the book was very influential. It influenced judges in other states. And so for the last 100 or so years, a lot of judges, a lot of courts, a lot of governments operate in the assumption that local governments really can't do anything unless the state says so.
Okay, so we got that out of the way. How does that relate to something that happens in Virginia?
So here in Virginia, local governments can do lots of things. Your city can pass a noise ordinance about how loud your party can be. Your county can issue property taxes on your home or business to help pay for what they do. But if they want to change anything, so here I have a question for you, Amber. Have you ever been to King's Dominion?
It's a staple in my childhood.
Yeah. We were more of a Busch Gardens family ourselves, but lots of people love King's Dominion too. There was a law in Virginia that said for many years, you could not start school before Labor Day. And it was called the King's Dominion law because local tourist industries like the theme parks really liked it that way because their high school kids would still be around in the summer to work the whole summer. Now, local school boards wanted to change it. They needed to start school earlier, but they had to get special exemptions. They couldn't get this changed, and the local school board didn't have the power to do it themselves. So finally, in about 2019, the General Assembly said, okay, we'll fix this. They changed the King's Dominion law, and now lots of school districts start in the middle of August, but they needed the state to say it was okay before they could do it. And this happens all the time. City wants to pass a new tax on grocery bags, or the county wants to impose an extra fee for stormwater removal or something. They have to go to the General Assembly and ask them to do it.
Okay. So are we stuck with this? Is there a way to change it?
There is a way to change it, and some states have. About 10 states have something they call home rule. So they've given blanket authority to counties and cities to do what they want, either in certain areas or just in general. But of those 10 states, Virginia is not one of them. Every year, the local governments have to come crawling down to Richmond and say, can you please fix this for us? Can you please do this thing? So I don't think there's going to be a change in the Dillon rule anytime soon. And it's all thanks to this guy, Dillon, who lived in Iowa 150 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems like job security, too, kind of for the General Assembly.
Yeah, they can have a lot of work to do all the time. Yeah. So thanks, Dillon. And thanks, Amber.
Thanks, Rich. If you have any questions, write us at rvasgotissues@vpm.org.
For this episode's Community Spotlight, we're joined by Ashley Williams. Ashley is, well, Ashley, we only have a couple of minutes. So you're a certified yoga therapist. You're founder of the Bare Soul Yoga Collective. You've been selected as a Style Weekly 40 Under 40. You're curator of the Race of Richmond art exhibit. You're the founder and operator of the Well Collective. Will probably stop there because we need to have time to talk to you. Welcome, Ashley.
Thank you.
So the Well Collective is, like you, many things. It's a studio space in Shockoe Bottom that offers classes in meditation, to yoga, things like that. Who are all these programs for, and why is it important to have this array of classes for mental wellness in the city here?
Yeah, so a lot of the work that has informed how we show up in the collective is deeply tied to the history of Richmond, specifically as the home of the second largest space of commerce of enslaved people, over 200,000 enslaved people that have then started their time in Richmond and then shifted and created an American country. And so many of the effects of just that simple historical fact can land in being a space that holds a lot of generational and historical trauma. And so the effects of that are economic instability, or the way that our economic development system has been formed, mental health diagnosis, physical health disorders, lack of housing, homelessness. We could name so many things that are created by the system of oppression that is rooted and that began in our city of Richmond. And so Bare Soul Wellness, in the form of both community programming and the brick and mortar of the Well Collective, stand to create a community space where we can address all of those issues, both individually, but then also as a community.
So it's not just sign up for classes and we'll combat that entire history, right? You have to take a more collective approach. So how does that shake out in the way that you operate your businesses?
The mission that I tend to invite people in is like, what is your contribution to the well-being of both yourself and of those that are in your community? And so the model that we land in is in practice and in community. And so we must practice how to be in deeper relationship with ourselves, mind, body, spirit, so we can be in deeper relationship and be a witness to those that are around us. And as people see and experience the work of taking care of their body, witnessing the thoughts and the perceptions that one might have in their mind, but also how they relate with each other, there's an invitation to contribute to that. You can contribute by either leading an offering that invites us into contemplation. You can also just contribute by showing up and doing the work on your own. And we trust that the work that you do with yourself then ripples when you go home into your family, when you go into your workspace setting, when you go back to your neighborhood, when you get back into the community.
So what brought you to this line of work? What brought you to this kind of broader mission?
In 2013, I experienced a loss of my aunt, Josephine Sonora Bennett, who was a Richmond City social worker. And so her work was deeply embedded in caring for those that showed up in our community in real ways. And she did that through relationship and a very full, warm spirit. When she passed away of cancer, I witnessed that I was showing up in community and creating space, but I wasn't filling my own cup. I did not have the deep, radical self-care tools to take care of myself. And so then I was leading in burnout and then also disconnection. And then the third thing is that the alternative ways that one can take care of themselves when they're managing physical and mental and emotional experiences, they weren't necessarily mainstream. It was pharmaceuticals, but not necessarily how do I take care of myself at the root. And so I found myself in a yoga class. And for me, from that moment forward, as I started rebuilding that connection and understand my relationship with myself, I witnessed and noticed that could be something that could be beneficial to those that were in my community, specifically in that moment, people of color and my family and my friends. But over time, when you create space that centers and represents people of color or those that are not necessarily represented in our mainstream, then we create space for everyone.
there's a big conversation that happens in some places about white spaces, black spaces, about how to make everyone feel comfortable together, and particularly those who have been excluded from spaces before. So how do you approach that? How do you make sure that when you say we're inclusive, we are welcoming everyone, but we're also making it welcoming in a way that isn't dominated by the folks who often dominate inclusive spaces?
Yeah. So thank you for that question, because I am a Black woman that initially started out creating space for the Black community. There is that question many times of people like, am I welcome in this space? Or maybe that's not the space that I should go because I want them to have a space. And so as my work has deepened, I've had to be really vocal and invitational to understand that I honor the human experience. And there are moments when that representation needs to be, there's work that needs to be done within our own demographic to create that. But the larger work is that we have to do it together. A lot of the work is founded on restorative practices, and that means community building. And that means creating space where dialogue and connection can happen in real ways beyond the barriers in which our society has told us that we were different.
So I think some congratulations are in order. You might be expanding a little bit. You've gotten another building. So talk a little bit about your choice of this building. This was not an accident. It was I think it's the Branch building on Main Street, right? What does that space mean to you?
The Branch building is historically one of the first buildings in the city of Richmond, specifically after the Civil War. It lays on the ground in the space where the most commerce of enslaved people happened in our city. It is the space, and I don't know this for it to be 100% true, but we are going to be doing deep history, is that it may be on the land of the first bank that has landed in this country. It is my role and my intention is to create a space in which the value of human life is centered as an abundant form of being in connection with this life versus money or human labor being formed. And so creating a restorative education and retreat center where people can learn what it means to value themselves and be in their space of creativity, to be taken care of, to be heard, to be felt, to be seen, but to do that through education, to do that through intentional community building, do that through moments of joy and connection, do that through social space and interaction, do that through silence. In this moment, I dare to say is just like recreating and reimagining a world that I desire my kids and future generations to be a part of, and having that happen in Richmond in a space that has held a lot of harm. I truly believe in the hope of bringing people together to then create space for healing.
Ashley Williams is an entrepreneur, a community builder, a healer, and founder and operator of the Well Collective. Thanks, Ashley.
Thank you.
That's our show. Thanks to our guests, Maurice Washington, Sarah Scarborough, and Ashley Williams. RVA's got issues, but we need you to tell us what those issues are. Tell us about it at rvasgotissues@vpm.org. Join us next time when RVA's got issues with, well, if you want to know, subscribe to us wherever you download podcasts. RVA's Got Issues is produced by Max Wasserman and Amber Coles. Meg Lindholm is our executive producer. Gavin Wright is VPM's managing producer of podcasts, and Steve Humble is VPM's chief content officer. I'm your host, Rich Marr. Thanks for listening.
I'm Rachel Martin. You probably know how interview podcasts with famous people usually go. There's a host, a guest, and a light Q&A. But on Wildcard, we have ripped up the typical script. It's a new podcast from NPR where I invite actors, artists, and comedians to play a game using a special deck of cards to talk about some of life's biggest questions. Listen to Wildcard wherever you get your podcasts, only from NPR.
VPM.